Hello, everyone. I am Keith DeStone, and it's HeroesX Office Hours. I'm here with Greg and Sarah and Janet this time, and we're going to talk about the discussion question for Hour 11 in this 14th version of HeroesX. The Hour 11 discussion question is, in your reading of the Odyssey, do you have a sense of completion by the time you reach the end? Or do you have a sense of incompleteness, as if the story had not been fully told? Either way you answer this question, please try to back up your answer by citing one detail that you think supports your line of thinking.
Well, lots of thoughts about this. I'm going to pick up on one where our participant has quoted from Odyssey 11 and what Teiresias says to Odysseus and what's going to happen, how he's going to come home, and then what he has to do afterwards, and about his death. And he's saying that this passage made the Odyssey complete, and that he doesn't believe every story quite finishes ever, but to read about the future or what will happen, then you can actually get that sense of an ending.
Very clever, and my compliments to this wonderful participant. However, I disagree. I think if we talk about our experience in reading the Odyssey in terms of two adjectives, one, Homeric, and two, Odyssean, we get two different kinds of Odysseus. The Homeric Odysseus is the star of an epic that is symmetrical with the Iliad. The Odyssean Odysseus is a much bigger Odysseus, much wider ranging, much broader, containing a wide range of ingredients that are narrowed down in the Homeric version. We talked in our previous meeting about, how did we put it? Whether Odysseus gets a bad press. I would say, and I'm in part inspired by this beautiful comment by our participant, that that the good press comes from the Homeric Odysseus, whereas the bad press is pretty much the consensus everywhere else. This is not to say that even the Homeric Odysseus doesn't have all sorts of gaps that refer to bad press. But going now to Odyssey 11, I think the prophecy of Teiresias is a prophecy that broadens the spectrum. Or let's put it another way, maybe I should say broadens the horizon. You see a better idea from the prophecy of Teiresias about all those other stories. And the part about whether all these Odysseus stories are predictably incomplete or complete, which is also observed by this clever participant, and that's why I said it was very clever, has a bearing on the opposition I'm trying to set up right now, inspired by this question between Homeric and Odyssean Odysseus. In a sense, the Odyssey is creating a signature for the wider, more general trickster figure of Odysseus, not only in 11, especially in the prophecy of Teiresias, but also at the beginning of the Odyssey, which is, again, so strange. It doesn't really seem to be introducing the Homeric Odyssey, or is it? We can circle back to that question, which is kind of an offshoot of this very acute observation, which is the kind of observation that makes me want to keep talking and not stopping. So the question is, does any Odysseus story ever have a completion? I would say here too, for the sake of the Iliad, the Homeric Odyssey has to have a happy ending. Yes.
All right. In the Iliad, we do not see Achilles' death. You know, we say we can. It's so sad for people to hear about this, and we hear in the Odyssey. Perhaps same thing is happening for Odysseus, that we cannot handle his death. We don't want to be apart from the hero.
Yes, well, I think it's a different kind of thing, actually, not the same kind of thing. And I'll tell you why, dear Janet, why I think this is that in the Iliad, you do have a very good funeral at the end. So in a sense, you do have a death that is processed properly by way of a ritually correct funeral. And that's the funeral of Hector. I'm now convinced, I hadn't thought of this when I was putting together the book, Ancient Greek Hero in 24 Hours. So it's not in H24H, but I now really believe that the funeral of Patroclus is polluted and has to be processed, has to be purified. That's why the Iliad keeps getting reperformed. Fine. But the funeral of Hector, I find a ritual perfection there. And I think the Athenian reception shows this, because when you think about Athenian statesmen making speeches towards the end of the 4th century, highlighting Hector as the best example for a good life and death for a warrior who dies for his community. When I think of that, that's not what I find in the Odyssey. You see what I'm saying? It's it's a happy ending, and he's staying alive. But I think the death is postponed not because of some kind of perfect death that happens in the Odyssey. The death of the suitors is a very messy thing, and should be the cause for endless vendetta. And okay, then Athena says, this has got to stop. Fine. But now, having said that, I want to change my mind. Because, there's all this controversy, and classicists can't stop talking about it. Why do some intellectuals in the Hellenistic era, that is to say, the era that's inaugurated by the death of Alexander the Great, why do intellectuals in the Hellenistic era, why do they think that maybe the Odyssey really ended with the reunion of Odysseus and Penelope? So before we ever get to Odyssey 24. And now I could make a counter argument to myself. What about the perfect funeral of Achilles in Odyssey 24? It's just perfect. And in a sense, the death of Achilles is perfect. But now can I make the pendulum go the other way again and say, but look, it's Achilles' death, not Odysseus' death, that's perfect in the Odyssey. So where do I leave things? In the air.
There are many ways for this story to go, and that is so it's fitting for Odysseus' character.
It really is. I'm thinking of that wonderful film version by Terry Gilliam, who was the only American Monty Python member, on the Baron von Munchausen, where the old baron just keeps on spinning the stories, and we think, oh, okay, now he's going to die because he's so old, he's so weak. Then the little girl says, tell me another story. And then he comes to life again. Not comes to life, he gets the energy to do another very energetic story. Then he runs out of steam and think, oh, he's going to die now. Then he comes back again with another story, and the little girl says, more, more, more.
We also had comments about Odyssey wrapping up things from Iliad. So in a way, it's a completion for the Homeric Iliad that we see in Odyssey.
Yes, yes, and I think that's the way the Homeric Odysseus is Homeric. Is he allows the story of Achilles to end properly. I think you really have a happy ending for Achilles. A happy ending in death, but it's a death that's true to a cult hero. Whereas, and again, I think more about my commentary to the Iliad and the Odyssey, the one that Keith and Leah edited and is a prototype for my various comments in a Homeric commentary in progress, where again, I go beyond the book, Ancient Greek Hero in 24 Hours, and I talk a lot about the closure that I see in Odyssey 24.
There are other parts of that closure that some of our participants have mentioned. And among them is Athena herself. And again, this goes back to the sort of between the Iliad and the Odyssey, if you like, the seizing of the Palladium. So she has a quarrel with Odysseus herself. It's not just Poseidon that we see more in focus. And then it all comes together. She's given the option by Zeus, whether it's still war or peace. He leaves it up to her. So she actually, in effect, makes her peace with Odysseus as well.
Yes, yes. And here I want to go out of my way and pay tribute to my dear friend and colleague, Douglas Frame, who, since he finished his book, Hippota Nestor, has been continuing with his analysis of such problems as the ending of the Odyssey, and the way Doug and I are now thinking about it. Let me just preview this, and this is as much Doug's thinking as my thinking. Is that if I tried to imagine an earlier reception of the oral tradition of the Odyssey, an earlier reception that is situated in Asia Minor, especially in the context of the confederation of 12 Ionian states, the Pan-Ionian. I think in that context, the presiding god of the story, the way the story comes to completion, would be Apollo, not Athena. And in the Odyssey that we have, our Homeric Odyssey, I'm not saying that the earlier Odyssey was not Homeric. We can call it Homeric as well. But in this, shall we say, Athenian phase of transmission, it's clear that the presiding deity is Athena, not Apollo. And yet there are traces of Apollo's preeminence, especially in the fact that the entire shall we say, sequence about the killing of the suitors is happening on Apollo's feast day. And the fumigation of the pollution is something that can be understood in terms of how Apollo can be the cleanser, the purifier of the pollution, not Athena. So then that would mean that the ever-increasing role of Athena, who is Our Lady of Athens, has to do with the Athenian phase of the reception of the Odyssey. So that's the way I think Doug would bless my interpretation of Homeric poetry as it continues to evolve, and the way Doug's thinking is currently. And you can see that our story hasn't finished either. Is the story of my analysis and Doug's analysis and the analysis of Lenny and all of us is an ongoing thing. It's such a complex thing, and why shouldn't it be complex when you think of the fact that, well, I'm saying fact, it's a fact to me that the Homeric tradition must have needed at least 1,000 years to reach the level of sophistication and complexity that we find in our Odyssey.
So Greg, earlier you referred to the beginning, and we have that, any point of departure. Is it almost as if we can have any point of arrival?
Oh, Sarah, how inspired that you said that, because isn't that what Homeric diction says? And I'll quote the original Greek, ton hamothenge thea. From any given point, O goddess, tell us. And us, of course, is not just me, the current performer, but me as the culmination of dozens, hundreds of previous performers. Tell us too, starting anywhere you like, Muse. Ton hamothenge, anywhere. Start anywhere. And then in our Odyssey, we start with Calypso's Island. Oh, thank you. Where is Calypso's Island? I don't know. It's even syntactically levitating. It's is it east? Is it west? I don't know. It's somewhere.
Well, friends, our journey will continue next time.
It must. It must. Our life depends on it.
All right. See you then.